Just a few days ago, we sat here and talked about what might Disney look like when they reopen. Well, now we actually have a better idea of what that's going to be. Just yesterday, the Orange County Economic Recovery Task Force held a meeting to talk about the opening of businesses in Florida, including Disney and Universal and the other large theme parks in the area. The details of that meeting were shared publicly, and I'll actually leave a link down to the full video of that meeting if you guys are curious to check that out. But today we're going to go over some of the highlights and what are some of the guidelines and mandates for both Disney and Universal when they decide to reopen. Before we take a look at these, I just want to call out that these are preliminary guidelines and are subject to change. This was kind of just the first pass at some guidelines and mandates, so I would imagine as the days and weeks move on, these may change a little bit. But let's take a look at what we know as of now. So what you see on your screen now are the guidelines and mandates for large theme parks, which is Disney and Universal. As far as guidelines go, there will be tape markings of 6 feet apart in ride attraction queues, staff to regularly wipe down surfaces at random, and in phase 1 and phase 2 of opening, staff who are 65 plus are encouraged to stay home. As far as the mandates go, all employees are required to wear face masks, touchless hand sanitizer at each ticketing entry and turnstiles, touchless hand sanitizer at each ride attraction entry and exit, temperature checks for staff prior to shift, temperature above 100.4 must not enter the premises, wipe down of all railing and surfaces regularly, and then it goes into some capacity notes here. In phase 1, the parks can operate at 50% of their capacity, and at phase 2, they can operate at 75% of capacity. So this is definitely a step in the right direction, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis met with President Trump yesterday on Tuesday, and sometime today he's going to be making his announcement about how Florida is going to ease into their reopening of the economy. So more to come from Governor DeSantis today, but for now, at least we have these guidelines and mandates as to what we can possibly expect at Disney and Universal moving forward. And just taking an initial look at these guidelines and mandates, the one thing that stands out to me is a lot of the emphasis is on the employee, as in the cast members that you're going to be dealing with. The employees, according to this preliminary mandate, are required to wear face masks, and the temperature checks are for the employees. Now, does that mean that guests won't be required to wear masks in the park? Does that mean that guests will not be receiving temperature checks? I don't necessarily think so. I think we're still gonna have to have some element of that, but it might not be maybe as strict as we initially thought. We still don't know. I would imagine that there's gonna be more information to come, as this, like I said, this is just the early preliminary guidelines and mandates. This is not the end-all be-all. So I'd imagine we would get some updates in the future, maybe when we get a little bit closer to reopening, as far as what the guests themselves should expect when they come to the parks. I do think the guideline on the floor of standing 6 feet apart in the ride and attraction queues is a great visual reminder to make sure you keep your social distance. We talked about that in the last video, and we referenced what's going on in Shanghai when they were kind of doing something similar, or at least testing those elements out. So I would definitely imagine that something similar to that is going to be coming here according to these guidelines. And then for the capacities themselves, I was a little bit surprised to see 50%. You know, if we're going to have to wipe the attractions down after each guest or each party goes on it, if we're going to be standing 6 feet apart in line, these are going to make the lines pretty long, right? And who knows if all attractions are going to be open. We mentioned in our last video, we don't necessarily think like rides like Smuggler's Run or Rise of the Resistance can open up just due to how tight their queues are. 50% of people is still a lot of people, no matter how you cut it. And if everyone is going to be distant and there's going to be these extra precautions, it's going to lead to increased wait times. And then when you get into phase 2 at 75% of capacity, that's where I think things could get a little bit messy in terms of having everybody waiting in a line. And then that kind of ties back into the initial thought of what are the virtual queues going to be like. That might be something that they utilize as well. Now let's take a look at some of the guidelines and mandates for hotels and restaurants according to the latest news from yesterday. As for the hotel guidelines, within phase 1, housekeeping services to be limited, promote mobile check-in if available. We're already seeing Disney kind of push mobile check-in in the My Disney Experience app for folks with current reservations. Housekeeping services only clean upon request or when guests depart. Allow employees to work from home if not playing a critical role in serving guests. Only deliver room services to guest doors. Provide self-parking. And then also, in addition to a couple of sanitary measures, they still want to encourage the staff who are 65 plus to stay home. Now, as far as mandates, all employees are required to wear face masks. Hand sanitizer must be in plain visible sight at entry. Employees will be receiving temperature checks prior to their shifts. All employees with flu-like symptoms are advised to stay home. Front desk to sanitize themselves on a regular basis. Consistent cleaning of all guest areas. Front desk to utilize sneeze guards. Remove all service items in guest rooms, including glassware, coffee cups, etc. They will not be stocking the mini bars. They will not be offering self-food services. I would imagine that buffets would fall into that category, but we don't know for sure. Space pool furniture according to distancing guidelines. Pool gates and chairs to be sanitized regularly. Door handles, elevator button, etc. Remove all coffee makers from guest rooms. Remove all guest collateral items. And then also in phase 1 and 2, no conferences. Personally, I think these make a lot of sense for phase 1. You want to keep housekeeping to a minimum. You don't want to necessarily have the housekeepers coming in and out of guest rooms, touching things that may be theirs, and then moving on to the next room. It's just an unsanitary practice. Mobile check-in makes a lot of sense. Like I mentioned before, Disney is kind of pushing that now with people that have current reservations. If you go into the My Disney Experience app, there will be kind of instructions on how to mobile check-in, where you can just go straight to your room upon arrival. You don't necessarily need to stop at the front desk. And then as far as the mandates go, I agree with a lot of these as well. Face masks, hand sanitizer, temperature checks. I do like the idea of a sneeze guard. I know myself, I've seen a lot of that in the supermarkets by me, where there's kind of that plexiglass shield between you and the cashier. I think that makes a lot of sense and kind of limits the interaction and the particles coming out of the mouth. And as I mentioned before, Governor DeSantis will be speaking today in terms of a timetable to open the economy. Now, does that mean he's going to specifically mention Disney and theme parks? I don't necessarily think so. I think it's going to be more in a general sense, just to give people an idea of what essential businesses may open, maybe in the beginning of May. Who knows on the exact time frame, but keep an eye out for that. And let us know down in the comments below what you think of these guidelines and mandates. Do you think that these are too much? Do you think that they're too little? Do you think that these are going to change a whole lot over time? Let us know down in the comments below. And if you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful, make sure you give it a nice big thumbs up. It helps us out a lot. And consider hitting that subscribe button if you're new here. We put out Disney videos all the time. With that being said, we'll see you guys real soon.